Hi, Dr. Sarah. I hope you are doing well. My name is Hari Saikal, and throughout this presentation, me, myself, and my other group mates will be presenting our video presentation regarding our assignment for our international business subject. So, we are actually from Group E, and the country that we picked in order to do our assignment is China. So, this is the group members consisting of four people, and uh, throughout this video, we actually put our name based on the numbers that we put in the group members page. So, for example, me, myself, Haris Haikal, I'm going to be answering question one. So, that's why I put my name in number one at the group member slide. So, as it is same for other people. So, our group consists of four people, which is me, Haris Haikal, second, Yuzi Wang, third, Wenwen Lee, and fourth, Yan Zhendi. So we're gonna continue for our introduction. So China is basically a country that came from a close agricultural society to world's global factory. China's transformation is defining economic story of our time. But for an Australian firm, China is more than just a massive market. It is a complex landscape of state led capitalism and ancient cultural values. Now, let's dive into the Dragon's economy. So, throughout this presentation, we're going to be analyzing the political economy of China and the legal hurdles for Australian investors. We will also weigh China's staggering economic growth against its human development progress and use frameworks like Hofstede's to bridge the cultural gap between Beijing and Canberra. Finally, we look at the future of trade through the classic theories of Smith and Ricardo. So to answer question one, there is actually two questions in question one, but I'm gonna go through the first question first. So the first question is about how has globalization influenced the political economy of China? So I'm gonna be dividing it to three system, which are political system, economic system, and legal system. So political system, China is basically a reinforced state capitalism and global influence. Before globalization, China is a closed centrally planned command economy under Mao Zedong socialism. So after globalization, China entered the World Trade Organization in 2001. This was a calculated politicalization to lock in economic reforms and gain predictable access to global markets, which in turn bolstered the Communist Party legitimacy to delivered growth. It also uh, gave China an outlook power. Globalization provided the wealth for China to project power to institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank (AIIB) and the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI), shifting from a rule taker to a rule maker in global governance. So, in terms of their economic system, China came from an agrarian backwater to a global hub. So before globalization, China is pretty much an isolated and poor country. So after globalization, China became a factory of the world. China leveraged its comparative advantage in low-cost labor to become the epicenter of globalization of production. This drove unprecedented GDP growth and urbanization. It also shaped up their value chain. China also exposed themselves to global competition and technology transferred spurred innovation. China is now a leader in EVs such as BYD, telecoms such as Huawei, and renewables, moving from made in China to created in China. So last but not least, the legal system. China is practice an instrumental adaptation for commerce. So before globalization, China uses a system based on socialist rule by law, subservient to the party, which weak commercial codes. So after globalization, China has a massive legal modernization to attract foreign investment and facilitate trade. China built a vast body of commercial contract and intellectual property. This was necessary to meet World Trade Organization's entry requirements and business expectations. This also makes China It will also make a persistent tension. The system remains dual purpose, facilitating international business while protecting the party's supremacy. This leads to an unpredictability as seen in the sudden regulatory crackdowns on tech in 2021 and due process concern. So the second question in the first question is asking about the challenges that might face an Australian firm when they want to open their business in China. So the first challenges is the civil law framework versus the common law. So basically, establishing a presence in China as an Australian firm involves navigating a legal landscape that is fundamentally different from Australia's common law tradition. China operates under a civil law system which prioritizes codified statutes over judicial precedent. So as I said before, the one of the challenges is the civil law framework versus the common law. So for an Australian firm, the most immediate hurdle is the shift from a system where judges make law through precedent to one where the civil code that is effective in 2021 is the primary authority. Roles of judges, for example, in Australia, judges interpret law based on previous cases. In China's civil law system, judges act more as investigators of the code. While guiding cases from the Supreme People's Court exist, they are not strictly binding in the same way as Australian precedents. So the second challenges is property rights and corruption. Property rights in China are heavily influenced by the principle of state or collective ownership. Uh, Talking about the ownership, I'm going to talk about the land ownership. We technically foreign businesses cannot technically own the land in China. Instead, they can obtain the land use rights, typically for 40, 50 to 70 years. This is a significant shift for an Australian firms use to freehold title. So corruption, talking about corruption and Guangxi. While China has intensified anti-corruption efforts, Guangxi, which in English it stands for personal connections, still plays a role in local administrative decisions. Australian firms are bound by the Australian Criminal Code Act in 1995, which criminalizes the bribery of foreign officials, creating a double bind where local expectations might conflict with Australian law. And last but not least, intellectual property IP challenges. China's IP system has improved significantly but remains a high risk area due to its first to file principle. First to file rule, unlike Australia, first to use principle, the first person to register a trademark or patent in China owns it, regardless of who invented it. In Australia, Australian firms often find their brands squatted by local entities before they even enter the market. For example, while major cities such as in China, such as Beijing and Shanghai, have specialized IP courts with high success rate for foreign plaintiffs, usually more than 80%, enforcement in rural provinces remains inconsistent. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my part. So my group mate, which is Yuzi Wang, is going to continue the second question.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuzi Wang. For question 2, I will analyze the level of economic development and human development in China and explain which measure is more important of Australia firms. First, I will talk about economic development. Economic development usually focuses on a country's economic capacity and market potential. This includes the size of economy, how fast it is growing, and the average income level of people. China is currently the second largest economy in the world, with a normal GDP of around $18.8 trillion in 2024. This shows that China has very strong production capacity and huge market size. For foreign firms, this means the potential market is very large. China also has a reality high GDP growth rate compared with many development countries. This suggests that the economy is still expanding and new business opportunities continue to emerge. However, GDP per capita in China lower than in countries like Australia, at around $13,300 in 2024. That said, its figure has been increased every year. For example, when Australia consumer brands consider entering China, GDP per capita is important indicator because it reflects the average purchasing power of consumers. So overall, China economy development can be summarized as a very large economy, strong growth potential, and high market opportunities. Next, I will move on to human development. Human development focuses on people quality of life, not just income levels. A commonly used measure is Human Development Index. According to data from UNDP, China's HDI in 2023 was 0.797, which places it in medium to high human development category. HDI includes three main components: education, life expectancy, and income. In China, education levels have improved significantly over time. Many workers are well educated, especially in areas such as engineering, technological, and manufacturing. Life expectancy has also increased, indicating better health care and living conditions. However, there are still large differences in income between urban and rural areas, which means human development is not evenly distributed across the country. Overall, China's human development level is improving, but it is still lower than Australia. When Australia firm considering establish a presence in China, economic development measures are more important than human development measures. Indicators such as GDP and GDP growth rates are particularly important because it directly shows the size of markets, the strength of consumer demand, and the potential for sales growth and profitability. Human development measures useful and understanding labor quality and long-term stability, but they do not directly reflect market size or immediate sale potential. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Yuwen. In this part, I will use Hofstede cultural dimensions and the globe framework to talk about the cultural distance between China and Australia. And then I will discuss whether the two cultures of the two countries are becoming more similar or more disparate. Firstly, within Hofstede's cultural dimensions, power distance is one of the biggest cultural differences between China and Australia. This explains how societies accept differences in authority and power. China scores high on power distance, which means hierarchy and top-down decision-making are common. Australia, by contrast, scores low and places more emphasis on equality and participative management. So Australia managers often accept open discussion and bottom-up feedback, but employees in Chinese may understand such behavior as inappropriate. This indicates that differences in authority relations are structural. Then we will go to the part of the individualism versus collectivism. China's collectivist orientation means that trust and obligation are embedded within long-term relationships, making it central to business interactions. In Australia, people rely more on contracts and individual responsibility in business. So Australia companies often underestimate the importance of relationships when establishing partnerships in China. Well, Hofstede showed the main cultural differences the GLOBE framework looks more closely at how differences appear in practice and in values. In GLOBE, family orientation focus on how close group loyalty shapes behavior in organizations. In China, it is strongly expressed at the practice level, means coordination relies heavily on personal relationships rather than impersonal rules. In contrast, Australia organizations rely more on institution trust and formal governance mechanism. Next, I will talk about performance orientation, which is used for understanding culture change. Studies by House show that in Confucian Asian societies like China, people value performance more than it is actually reflected in daily practice. For Australia firms, this means that even when Chinese companies use performance metrics, business is still strongly influenced by relationships rather than being driven by metrics alone. Convergence theory suggests that organizations become more similar over time. In China, this can be seen in the adoption of performance management system and Western business education. So, divergency theory still matters. Hofstede and Globe show that power distance and relationship-based way of working are still deeply rooted in Chinese organizations because these changes mainly affect management tools, not core culture values. So there is no strong evidence of full convergence. So culture distance remain quite large. So to conclude, China and Australia still show clear cultural differences, particularly in authority and the role of relationships. Although some management practices are becoming more similar, the underlying ways of thinking remain quite different. China continues to emphasize hierarchy in group ties, while Australia focuses more on quality and form rules. So overall, this is limited convergence on the surface, but deep cultural differences remain.
To the topic four, and today I would like to talk about which industry China should specialize in when engaging in international trade based on the series of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. And firstly, I will explain Chinese industry under the Adam Smith theory of absolute advantage, and then under David Ricardo series of the comparative advantage. Okay. To the Adam Smith, a country should specialize in industry where it can produce goods more efficiently and at a lower cost than other countries. In China case, manufacturing and engineering contracting are two industries where China has clear absolute advantage. Firstly, China has a strong absolute advantage in manufacturing, and China has a complete industrial supply chain and large scale production capacity and relatively low production cost. As a result, China can produce manufactured goods such as the electronics, household appliances, and machinery more efficiently than many other countries. Another industry where China has an absolute advantage in engineering contracting, and Chinese companies are highly competitive in infrastructure projects such as the railway, bridge, and power plants. They are able to deliver projects at lower cost and in shorter time period, especially in developing countries. Um, to the David Ricardo. In contrast, the David Ricardo series of comparative advantage focus on the opportunity cost. And even if a country is efficient in many industries, it should specialize in those where the opportunity cost is the lowest. And China has comparative advantage in labor-intensive manufacturing with a large and skilled workforce. And China can produce goods such as the clothing, furniture, and daily consumption consumer products at a relatively low opportunity cost compared to many other countries. And China has a growing comparative advantage in high-end manufacturing and technology industries. Examples such as the electric vehicles and high-speed rail technology and telecommunication equipment. And compared with other industry, China opportunity cost in developing these sectors is relatively low. Um, okay, and China has a strong comparative advantage in the digital economy with a huge domestic market and advanced digital platform. China has developed efficient e-commerce, like mobile payment like Alipay, this kind of, and some payment system. And this advantage make the digital economic and important sectors for the China in international trade. Okay, and the preferred approach for the China and to overall, I believe China should mainly follow Ricardo series of the comparative advantage. This theory better reflects the structure of the modern global trade and allows China to allocate resources more efficiently. Focusing on the industry with the lower opportunity cost, China can achieve sustainable growth and move up the global value chain. Okay, and I think China's comparative advantage is gradually shifting from the labor-intensive industry to the technology-intensive and digital industries. Into conclusion. Okay, thank you for joining our presentation about China through its political, economic development and culture and trade strength. And China remains a complex yet highly important country in the global economic now. Okay, thank you.